every system is changing from a neuroscience perspective. What we see, what we detect, and how we respond is changing too. So what level of awareness can you bring to that state of change? And what does it call on you by way of relationship? Because if you're changing, you're naturally changing the dynamics and the relationships that you're in, whether you know it or whether they know it. And so there's a level of awareness that you need to bring to that fact as you think about engaging and bringing forth the better qualities that we all wish for in relationship.
Welcome back to Stepwise, a series of juicy conversations with interesting people and impactful leaders about their journeys, struggles, successes, and lives, and the wisdom we gain along the way. Does wisdom have a place in leadership? Absolutely. Can it be learned and accelerated? I've got 45 years experience saying that it can. These interviews are intended to share examples of those who are doing it. Today's guest is Mark Eckhardt, co-founder and CEO of Common, and founder and CEO of 1 Million Truths. 1 Million Truths harnesses AI and scientific research to revolutionize conflict prevention and transformation worldwide. Said differently, he's out to prevent or successfully resolve global conflict. Mark's a deep lover of humanity and a warrior for the kind of self-awareness and development work of leaders needed to connect deeply with others. He believes that our nervous systems are beleaguered like we're in a war. In today's podcast, Mark shares how 1 Million Truths was enlisted to reduce polarization in the U.S. political ecosystem and society after the 2024 election, and increased openness and warmth across the political divides. They use conflict science and complexity science to be precise in what you put out, to dial down tensions, create harmony, the importance of not going directly at the conflict or the problem, but rather going adjacent to it to gather data and perceptions in all directions around the conflict. Boy, there's a lot to unpack here with a powerful advocate for presence, self-awareness, and resolving conflict. Please enjoy my conversation with Mark Eckhardt. Mark Eckhardt, welcome. And I appreciate you taking time to come into Stepwise and have this conversation with me.
Thank you, Foster. It's good to be here. You've invited me to share a little bit about myself. I think I'll begin by sharing that I secretly idolize farmers. I'm crazy about tractors.
And Whitney every Houston, boy's dream. Every boy's dream.
Exactly. I moved to the country specifically just to be around farmers and tractors. And so on a regular basis, they go blowing by, on the street and they're working in the fields. I love it. And Whitney Houston once threw a water bottle at me. So that's a tall tale to share.
Oh my God. Well, we have to dig into that, of course. Before we do, I have to fess up. I'd always wanted a pivot.
Okay.
And for those people who don't know, a pivot is this massive sprinkler that stretches across a field that farmers use. Mm-hmm. Out here in Montana, we do a lot of dry crops. So they rely on the rain and they plant and they get one crop and they mow it or whatever they do. They don't need a pivot. But there are many, many crops that need pivots. And so I've always strangely wanted a pivot. And a number of years ago, I had an opportunity to work with some other people to invest in a plot of land, and on it was a pivot. And I was so excited. The things we geek out on, it's just crazy.
I know. Pretty basic stuff.
Oh my God. Yeah. Mark, you were referred to me by dear friends here in Bozeman, and I was so fascinated. Reading your bio is one of the most fascinating things I've done in a while. And so let me make sure, I'm going to read some of these things just to make sure I don't screw them up.
Okay.
You're a global conflict mediator and leader. You're a Buddhist priest, CEO, entrepreneur, community builder, and you're an American living in Denmark. So Mark Eckhardt, what's the through line here? What is the thing that connects all of those things together? In essence, who are you?
I'm still trying to answer that
Mic drop,
question.
yeah.
Exactly. My wife would probably appreciate you asking too. She'd like to know after 20 years. Um, the through line is I just have a very profound love for humanity. Uh, People intrigue me. How we exist together and coexist together fascinates me, and I ruminate on it constantly. The world that we've been able to create as a result of our kind of unique capacity to work through constraints. And constraints are kind of the gateway to harnessing creativity, and creativity being a reflection of our ability to assign meaning to the world. Like all those things just have fascinated me from when I was a young boy. And so the through line has been trying to understand that, trying to confront that as openly, as vulnerably as I possibly can at every stage, and to align myself with people that were doing really interesting work that was for the betterment of humanity. So, as you read my bio and as people have gotten familiar with it on their own, it can appear like it's been a very weavy road or journey, but the through line is really that love and deep, profound relatedness to humanity and wanting to be in service of it and to it.
That's wonderful. And it leads me to this next question, which is, I am a student and practitioner in EQ-based leading.
Yeah.
You talk about that, deep respect for that connectedness and humanity. This is a pressurized time, unlike many others. There have been maybe a few, but not for a while. How is a leader to have that relatedness, that profound respect and connectedness with others in light of all of those things?
I can just share from my experience. I would say 4 or 5 years ago, I felt like I had kind of reached the edge or the peak of my agency, my skill, my ability. And so I sought out the help of a coach. Her name is Robin Nathan. She's fantastic. And it was through working with her that it became very clear that there were parts of myself that I had either suppressed or that have been dormant for many, many years that were now being called on, and that are now necessary as a leader. And so I've had to kind of do the inner work to actually get those parts of myself to come back online. And those are the parts that I'm finding have given me greater capacity to deal with that long list of challenges and dynamics that you just spoke of.
Give an example of the kind of inner work that allows a leader to have greater agency in dealing with the multi-generations or with the complexities and challenges of those he or she leads.
Well, what I found was, like everybody else, we contort ourselves, we shape our identity, we emphasize certain capacities that we have in order to be part of what's happening in the world, to be part of an organization and to integrate ourselves in it. Part of it is survival, part of it is just a deep desire for relatedness, part of it is control, et cetera, et cetera. And I found that for me, the parts that I had suppressed were the parts that of my ability and how I'm wired that allow me to make very big connections, and to interpret what's going out in the world. And I had kind of severed those things off in order to kind of shove myself from being a little farther out on the spectrum in those capacities to kind of conforming to the middle, because I wanted to fit in. And I was very, very uncomfortable being described as or identified as somebody who's just a little bit outside of the group, not quite fitting in 100%. And so I had to do a lot of work to get comfortable with being a little farther outside of the spectrum. And that, I mean, that takes me back all the way to childhood and experiences of childhood and unresolved and unaddressed trauma. So it really took a number of efforts and rounds of peeling back the layers to be able to bring, again, that part of myself back online and to do it in a way that I'm comfortable and that I can own without feeling like I'm alienating myself or being alienated.
Physician, heal thyself.
Yeah.
The work starts here. I'm postulating these days that the notion of understanding and appreciating and working with people will require a deeper level of connectedness than perhaps leaders had done before.
Yeah.
But that the precursor to that is our own work, is our own presence,
Yeah.
is our own mindfulness, it is suspension of awareness and suspension of biases that we might hold that would hold me back from a deep, profound relatedness with you.
Yeah.
Sounds like that's the work you're doing or have done.
That's the work I have done, and it's an ongoing.
Excellent. And I think that's the answer too. My daughter is in this business. I interviewed her for this last year, and she made a comment. It was very bold, I thought, at the time, but I really do appreciate it. And said, any leader who isn't doing his or her work or hasn't done his or her work is lost and incapable of keeping up with the workforce challenges.
Yeah, I think that's accurate too, and I think that those shortcomings or that shortcoming shows up faster, given the sheer volume of dynamics and challenges that we're all trying to navigate and understand and lead through. So that gap is shorter and shorter. And it probably correlates to just evolution in technology, if we want to look at it through that lens.
You know, I'm interested in this book originally started out thinking about authenticity. My first interview was with Bill George, kind of one of the founders of modern thinking and authentic leadership. And I realized pretty quickly that road, starting with some work done 25 years ago, had been covered pretty well. What hadn't been covered is this kind of new covenant I think the times might require, which is a little bit deeper. Okay, I'm authentic. What does that call in you? How does that influence you? How do we use that realness, that sense of authenticity together? Yeah. And how do we honor the needs of the organization that are going through massive disruptions and themselves? You know, that's part of this triumvirate concern that I've got. The word suffering is a little too strong, maybe, but a lot of people that I know that I work with at that level are just beleaguered.
Yeah.
They don't know what they can say publicly. They don't know what they can say internally.
Yeah.
You know, they're getting hit every day with challenges that are not linear and they're not rational, but they've got to deal with them. So that's kind of where that one starts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you just think about the nervous system is challenged on a level that I don't think we've seen. Maybe exceptions are if you're in a war, in a battle, or in a violent situation or abusive situation. But if you just think about the rate of change at social systems, which you're speaking about, how leaders are adapting their personal systems, their beliefs, their values, their positions on issues, and so on and so forth, and how that's affecting their perception, their peripherals. So we're seeing calibration and oscillation there. And that's resulting in different forms or strategies for control. In some cases, those strategies end up more coercive. People try to apply more force. Yep. And there's a long list of strategies that people are trying to employ on the other side that could be described as a little more EQ-ish. But I think the important thing to just acknowledge, to give leaders a little bit of space and a break, is the fact that every system is changing from a neuroscience perspective. What we see, what we detect, and how we respond is changing too. So what level of awareness can you bring to that state of change? And what does it call on you by way of relationship? Because if you're changing, you're naturally changing the dynamics in the relationships that you're in, whether you know it or whether they know it. And so there's a level of awareness that you need to bring to that fact as you think about engaging and bringing forth the better qualities that we all wish for in relationship.
You know, I'm struck by the comment that our nervous systems are beleaguered at a level like they were in war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, from a macro or a meta perspective, we are in a war. There's wars going on in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in certain parts of Africa, and there's different types of war going on. There's wars of social justice. There's wars between genders. So conflict is abundant in ways that we, especially in the West, haven't had to live through before. Other cultures certainly have, and so this is new for us. So it's not surprising that you're seeing so much disruption to how leaders lead.
That's, the analogizing this time to various conflicts. It seems to me also there's a war we don't talk about because it doesn't feel like a battle, but it's kind of the war for our mind share, the war for our attention, that comes through, the 24/7, 365 news cycle.
Yeah.
The algorithmic nature of feeds to us that we view as normal now, but our nervous systems are bombarded all the time. Fascinating stuff, Mark. Really fascinating. You talk about your focus is kind of on the edge of that kind of conflict. I'd love you to describe Common in greater detail, and I'd also like to learn more about 1 Million Truths.
I'll start with Common. My co-founders and I founded Common in 2010, specifically to help people build, launch, and promote businesses that were aimed at solving big problems: climate change, biodiversity loss, et cetera, et cetera. We adopted a rather unorthodox approach, meaning that we maintained a very small internal team and got really good at activating and using our network and ecosystem. Cool. So we intentionally minimized the amount of complexity that we were dealing with internally in order to be more effective at an ecosystem level. And we grew the business to, we were working with people in 38 different countries, 40 plus different industries, really helped them generate immeasurable social impact and environmental impact, but also about $100 billion in organizational value too. So we really kind of found the right balance and ratio of where to put effort and how to identify different forms of value and to co-generate it. And I just have to tip my hat to the entrepreneurs and groups that we worked with. I mean, certainly they did the heavy lifting and deserved credit, but it's been an honor to contribute in the ways that we have. And so that work, in addition to really, really talented entrepreneurs, work also spanned working with presidential candidates in the United States, top economists, renowned thought leaders, people who really were very aware of the need for innovation and evolution in the way that we're doing things, and people who had recognized that the models that they had employed up to that point were no longer generating the same kinds of results that they were comfortable with and needed.
And Common continues today?
Common does continue. We shifted our focus. So in 2020, in the midst of the pandemic and everything else that was unfolding in the States and worldwide, we realized that we were out on an inflection point in terms of the world. And at the same time, realized that there were a lot of other very talented groups that were helping people build, launch, and promote organizations, and that we could be a better service by doing what we could do to more accurately and more deeply understand what was unfolding that was leading to these massive experiences and disruptions we were having as a society and as a world. And that led to 3.5 years of research. And it was during that time I founded 1 Million Truths. 1 Million Truths began as a media initiative, collecting stories about people's experiences, but in hearing consistencies in the things that people were sharing about their experiences trying to enact change, that gave us reason to pause. And so we did extensive research down a number of rabbit holes across a number of different areas. And ultimately that led us to conflict. And we feel that the thing that is holding us back in most part is our inability to deal with conflict constructively and in a healthy manner. And that's just been an area and even an obsession in terms of my focus ever since.
It's a watchword for our time, certainly. Is it my understanding that in the conflict mediation, that world, that you're incorporating AI modeling now?
Yeah.
And because I know this much, can you walk a layperson through that? How how does AI assist in this world of conflict?
Sure. So our process is really simple. We refer to it as just narrative intelligence.
Okay.
So helping people navigate uncertainty and macroeconomic change. We begin by developing narrative intelligence, meaning we go to areas that are affected by conflict dynamics or disruptions in business, and we gather stories from people who are experiencing those effects. And then we use artificial intelligence to analyze
Mm.
what they've submitted to us. And that allows us to know in a very granular fashion the way people are communicating with each other and the resulting links. So we get down to like what's happening on the street. Like we
Mm.
want to know about what people are saying about the fight between Johnny and Billy on the playground. We want to know what people are saying
Mm.
about layoffs at the local factory. It's because it's those narratives, it's the meaning that people are assigning and attaching to those experiences, which are forming the links and determine how people are behaving and relating to each other. So through collecting stories and experiences and using technologies, we can map all of that out. And so that's really empowering. The second step is to apply 5 indicators for resilience that are used by peace builders around the world. And that allows us to identify where to
Mm.
focus as opposed to just kind of aiming and spraying. And so once we know what's actually going on and how people are linked, and then in step 2, we identify where to focus, what to increase, what to decrease, then we get into the mindsets. Then we
Mm.
start looking at how changes in social systems and personal systems are shifting what people are perceiving and how they're adapting their strategies for control and
Mm.
the evolution of their agency. Then we develop the actual strategies that go out. So we're talking about dialing responses up in a way so they really, really deeply resonate. So stories, content, media, programming, whatever it is that needs to be deployed into conflict zones or into market to achieve results, we do that at that stage. And the results that we're producing are pretty staggering. It's fantastic.
And talk about that. Share some, if you don't mind. Share
Sure.
some of those results, because you're dealing with more than just business organizations or family systems. You're talking about stuff much larger.
Yeah. Yeah. So the example that comes to mind here in this moment is the work we did during the 2024 presidential election. I'm sure you
Wait, there was an
recall.
election? Wait,
There was an election. It
I
was.
tuned it out. No,
There you go. Selective perception. Yeah. So 2024, I'm sure you recall, and I'm sure that your listeners and watchers will recall that, where there were big predictions for mass violence. Like
Yep.
it was very scary. And we were core and central to an effort to prevent violence from breaking out. And long story short, fortunately, nothing happened.
Right.
On the societal level, there were a few incidences that were one-offs, but nothing huge erupted. And part of that is because we were able to do 3 things very, very effectively. When it came to putting content out online in the form of a media campaign, we were able to be so specific in our targeting that we were generating up to 91% engagement rates in states like Texas and Georgia. I think the average across Facebook and YouTube, I think Facebook was 78%, YouTube was about 60% engagement. So we're talking about numbers that are better than a Nike campaign, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. Unheard of.
The second thing that we did incredibly well was reduce polarization, animosity, distrust, feelings of threats across political divides. And we increased openness and warmth across divides too.
Mm.
And that was verified by Stanford's Polarization Research Lab.
Mm.
And then the third thing that we did incredibly well was put stuff out that had credibility, legitimacy, and deep, deep resonance. And we were rated by another platform, scale of 0 to 100. We were rated at 91.34%, which was just adjacent to how Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was rated.
Wow.
Dr. King got a 99%, we got a 91.34%. And that group, Pangea Social, was just like, this is crazy. And so this is a great example of how you can use conflict science and complexity science to get very clear about what's happening in culture, what's happening in community, what's happening at the world level, and to be precise in what you put out in order to trigger certain things that dial down tensions, create safety, create harmony, and also create commercial opportunity too. So it can work for conflict specifically, but can also work for brands who are needing to generate results.
I'm a hospital CEO, and I understand all of that on a global basis. I've got tensions in my facility because of polarization, partly political, exposing more kind of economic bias, all of that stuff. I've got more tension in my organization today than I've worked really hard to make sure that didn't occur, and it is occurring. Yep. What practical advice do you have for me? Are there tools that I can use? Is there a shift in thinking? How do I affect my culture? I know that's a lot, but I'd love you to kind of weigh in at the kind of the individual organizational level, because I'm guessing that most of the people that are going to be listening here are, kind of leaders in mostly for-profit enterprises who are experiencing many of the same things.
Yeah. I'll begin with one of the big mistakes leaders make is they go right at the problem. We've got polarization and divide. We've got disagreements happening over there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they go right at the problem of my former training, and you do a workshop. When it comes to conflict and when it comes to complexity, complex dynamics, you want to look at what's happening adjacent. So we address things adjacently. So to go back to 2024, there were people that we knew had a tendency to fan the flames of conflict. They're called conflict entrepreneurs. The worst thing that we could have done was target conflict entrepreneurs and say, you got to stop that. And actually, we've got a program for you to stop doing that and being that. Rather, we targeted people who had influence on conflict entrepreneurs and activated and mobilized them. So to give folks who are listening and watching, that's the first thing we would do was say, don't go right at the problem. Second thing you would want to do is you would want to gather anecdotes, people's experiences on the staff, throughout the operation, throughout the facility, even on the patient side too. That's going to allow you to identify how people are linked again, and what is it that's being communicated and interpreted that's providing and fanning the flames of that divide and that polarization.
Is this just basic social science research or using technology-enabled data collection? How does that work?
Yeah. So what we do is we go through a design process. We figure out what we need to know and understand and interpret. And then we actually use technology to have people journal. And so we'll give them a prompt. We'll give them a prompt. They'll respond to the prompt and answer a few questions that help us understand how they're assigning meaning to the thing that we're curious about. And then we map it out, and then we come up with a plan. So a great example is you can use something as simple as a change in the color of a uniform to activate certain attributes that you want to bring forth in your staff to dial down polarization. So you can use symbols, you can use rituals, you can use training, et cetera, et cetera. There's a number of ways that you can approach the thing that you're seeking to shift. But what you don't do, again, is hit it head on. That's only going to reinforce the dynamics that you don't want.
So if I'm a CEO, I don't want to hit it head on. I know that there's some process of gathering information, either adjacencies or whatever. What else do I need to know? What mindsets do I need to have to make sure that, I'm enabling solution as opposed to, furthering the conflict?
Yeah. Orientation, knowing which domain you're in. So there's 4 domains. There's chaos. So when something erupts and you don't have control over it and you don't know how to get control of it, you could be in the domain of chaos. Then there's the complex domain, which is not quite chaotic, but you still don't know what's causing B to happen. So you don't have causality figured out. Then there is the complicated domain, which is we figured out causality. We're somewhat confident if we do A, B is going to happen, but we really need to exert a lot of effort and really stay on top of it. And then there's the clear domain, which is where you figured causality out and now you can scale. So the first thing I would say to a CEO or the leader of a hospital would be, what domain are we in? Are you in the middle of chaos? Or have things settled down? Are you coming out of a chaotic period but still haven't figured out what needs to happen and proven it? And so we get oriented, and then we collect anecdotes, people's experience, we analyze, and then we design a series of fail-safe experiments to get to causality. And once we land on what works, then we move it to the next domain and the next domain, which ultimately allows us to scale.
It takes a notion of conflict, which we've been talking about forever, since the beginning of time, but gives some dimensionality to it and some better way of understanding and having some purchase on some activities that that helps resolve it. It's interesting. I've often thought that kind of the leaders as the meaning makers, which is only partially true, because we are all the meaning makers.
Yeah.
And the influence collectively, and that the relationships that I have just in casual conversation with others may be fanning the flames of some beliefs or practices that I may not even be aware of and I may not want.
Yeah.
That's very interesting stuff.
Yeah. In this space, in this domain of work, the only thing that you're assured from taking an action is that there's going to be a reaction. You can never predict until you establish causality. And that's the thing that alerted us early on. You may recall me sharing when you first asked about 1 Million Truths, that we were having all these conversations and we were seeing people just really struggling trying to enact change. Well, they weren't aware of the domain that they were beginning in, and they would just do something and it would cause a ton of opposition and backlash. So we see that happening all over the place. And so our approach allows us to get clear on the domain that we're beginning from or need to begin from, and we understand what actions to take, and then we have a simple process to generate the information and insight to move in a way that has more consistency and ultimately predictability, which increases control, which is ultimately what a leader needs. Right now, leaders are struggling from a diminishing control due to all the factors and dynamics that are alive. But we can increase control, and we can increase predictability and precision.
I've been wondering about the added or sharpened tools in a leader's toolkit these days, and that it sounds as though, and I'll throw a couple of words or phrases or techniques out, but I'd love you to deepen them. Like a kind of basic mindset is that if I can keep separate from the conflict itself, if I stay somewhat attached as opposed to in the mud with others, then I can have a little bit more balanced perspective. Having a mindset that conflict can lead to some great outcomes, but that by itself isn't going to necessarily resolve in the direction I want. What are the other attitudes or skills that today's leader needs to have and develop?
Conflict, it's really critical that you understand conflict. And that's why I'm porting it into a for-profit corporate space, because we're just dealing with it at every level. You need to understand complexity. You don't have to be a PhD at it, but you need to understand complexity and how systems work and why they respond the ways that they do. And then 3, you need the tools and you need the processes to be able to develop solutions that are not going to cause harm to your organization, but allow you to test and validate your way to the kind of results that you need that you can then further invest in and scale. Technology is core to that. Technology is an accelerator. If used in the right way, it's an accelerator that's ethical too. And you're going to need to be comfortable iterating a whole lot more than you probably are.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that pushes leaders up against, the calendar, the timeline, and the quarterly reports and things like that. Uh, Peace builders think in generations. I
Hmm.
feel that that's too long. We don't have generations to produce results.
Right.
But also in this context, a corporate context, we don't necessarily have can limit ourselves to just 3 months to produce a
Right.
result that is trying to happen and trying to be made in extreme complexity and change.
Super helpful. I agree with that notion of kind of longer term time horizon. And it's not a month and it's not a quarter necessarily, but it's
Yeah,
not a generation. It's somewhere in there. And the pressures that leaders are feeling is so immediate, so acute
yeah,
that, of course, they want to throw everything they've got at it and fix it now because
yeah,
that's what they've been trained to do. They've been trained to identify problems and fix them. And
yeah.
what you're talking about is a much broader data based, data oriented approach that involves human interaction, social science techniques, um, and patience, an awful lot of patience, it sounds like.
Yeah. And patience doesn't necessarily mean slow and lethargic.
Right.
It means discipline and diligence.
Yeah. Yeah. Non reactive.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Super. Um, so the example of the 2024 election was fascinating to me. So an organization brings in common for that and they
One
hire,
million
oh,
truths.
sorry, 1 million truths, and they hire
Yeah.
you to do that.
Yeah.
Um, like what's next on your horizon? How do you, because that sounds fabulous and the results are clear. People don't know why there wasn't violence, but this is an important contributor to that result.
Yeah.
What's next for 1 million truths?
We have been invited to help a group of people in Costa Rica address into political instability. So their democracy is beginning to fray on the edges. That's big work, very interesting work. We're also 2 phases in to our work as an organization, 1 Million Truths, our work on the 250th anniversary of the United States. And so we're looking at these big cultural moments, both in the US and the world, and saying, how can we participate in ways that are going to help leaders generate the clarity and control they're going to need to feel safe playing in the waters of the 250th, given political uncertainty, given just the level of activity of activist groups, given concerns about physical safety. And so we're very confident that with our methodologies and our technical capability that we can find that safe passageway for brands to generate really powerful moments with citizens throughout the country,
Hmm.
and moments that lead to commercial results too. And to get that started, we've actually been collecting anecdotes from Americans across the country.
Wow.
And so far, that work has reached all 50 states, all political identities, racial identities, ages, et cetera, et cetera. And people are participating by submitting a digital postcard with information and how they feel about the United States right here and
Hmm.
now, leading to the 250th anniversary. And they're writing those postcards to Americans that they admire. And the data
Wow.
that we've got so far, it's not totally complete yet. We're still collecting data. The data we have so far is mind blowing.
Hmm.
Mind blowing. So exciting.
Can you give a snippet without tipping your hand too much?
I can. I can.
Thank you.
We have been in conversation with people responsible for executing the federal strategy, America 250 strategy. We've been speaking to people who are leading state commission efforts as well as civic efforts. We're talking about libraries, museums, et cetera, et cetera. And what we found to be missing in the midst of that glorious work that's happening is the people.
Hmm.
And so we've gone out to the people because we want to make sure that every American has an opportunity to contribute to what happens during the 250th, and they see themselves reflected to the degree that that's capable. Um, and so the data is showing that Americans really do not want a retelling of the American story.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, they really don't want a doubling down on democracy and kind of a pep talk around its institutions. They are deeply concentrated around family and community, but there's very clear indicators that Americans in large part feel that solutions at the community level are not enough for what's needed right now.
Mm.
And so they're looking for big, international, and different in terms of scope and scale.
Wow. I think we could
So
spend a whole session on that. That's fascinating
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Fascinating stuff.
If you put that in context, and I love Ray Dalio's work on changing world order. I think everybody should be reading his work and following him right now, among others. But he sticks out at this point in time. So if you put what I just shared in the context of changing world order, is what it tells us is that Americans are beginning to orient to the future that is yet to take form or be articulated. And if you're a leader at a brand and you're thinking about the 250th, you want to find a way to put things into culture and market during the 250th that are going to adhere people to your brand, consumers to your brand, in a way that they're going to carry you forward into the future that's emerging. And that's what we can help them do.
Is your client the chief marketing officer?
Chief marketing officer, marketing director, CEO. We like to come in at the CEO level because we can have that big strategic conversation, help make sure that we're oriented in the right ways, and then we can go to work.
Am I making this up? It seems as though your work also profoundly affects internal organizational culture. The way that you do it and the tools that you employ, gathering stories, showing connectedness and influence maps that most leaders wouldn't be aware of. And do I have that right?
That's totally accurate. So we can literally collect anecdotes from team members, staff, from all different departments across the organization. We can pull it in from consumers, customer groups, and we visualize it in a way where we can just offer it to the CEO and say, this is your system. This is actually what you're existing in, and this is what you're reacting to and trying to control and steward. And when does a leader have an opportunity to actually see their organization reflected that way, as opposed to just numbers and digits on a page in an Excel sheet?
Yeah, never. Yeah.
And then simply we ask, what would you like to do to change this or influence this? And that ignites their creativity and their thinking.
Wow.
So it's not us necessarily coming in as the experts telling you what to do and postulating, that we have the answer. It's here's your system. Here's what's actually going on. Here's how people are connected and linked together. And this is why you're seeing these kinds of behaviors playing out. What would you like to do? And then they can point at the areas where they want to invest in, as opposed to us telling them.
Tell me about, how the genesis for these things occur. Or was it part of a brainstorming thing about the world ills? What was the spark that led to common? What was the spark that led? Well, you told about 1 million truths, but how does this occur? And how does this occur?
I've always just followed my gut and followed what piqued my curiosity and attention, coupled with that early kind of awareness and profound connection to and with humanity. I guess I've just pursued things that would allow me to kind of vest myself more deeply into that. And the what, in terms of what I'm going to be involved in and what organization, has just kind of showed up quite naturally. To be very specific, how I ended up becoming a co-founder of Common was I actually led the strategic process that resulted in Common. So Alex Bogusky, for those folks who are fluent in the ad world, considered to be the Steve Jobs of advertising, super creative individual. And Rob Shuham, who was equally talented and very successful as an entrepreneur, came to Los Angeles and happened to be clients at a boutique consultancy that I was working with. And I just, by luck, or maybe not luck, was assigned to lead them through the strategic process that we had developed. And the result of that was Common. And then they invited me to join them to bring Common into the world.
Wow.
And and it was, here are two incredibly smart, talented individuals who are somewhat moving to the edges of capitalism at its highest levels in order to address some of the things that capitalism has just not been able to get to, that were leading to problems and challenges. And we haven't touched on this, but I had also spent 15 years training formally in a Zen Buddhist context, and had taken a vow to end the needless suffering in the world. And so what Rob and Alex were seeking to do, as it became clear throughout the strategic process, and I was seeing that what I was committed to doing and the vow that I had taken matched really well with that. It was really kind of a match made in heaven, and they fortunately invited me to come along for the ride. And then I took over as CEO about two and a half years in, and just said, we're going to go this way. We're going to do what we can to provide as much access to our infrastructure and talent and our network to as many people who are feeling a similar call that we need to do things a little differently.
This is before the conversations about kind of conscious capitalism.
It was right as it started to take hold. So you were talking about 2010.
Yeah.
I would say social entrepreneurship had been around. Ashoka, for example, had been doing their thing, but nobody had really cracked the code from a branding perspective. And so when you have one of the best advertisers and branders as part of your co-founder team, that gave us a real advantage. And so we landed right in the middle of the zeitgeist at the right time, with the right amount of cuss words and the right positioning to generate a lot of attention.
Wow. You're at the forefront of this notion of conflict, both globally and societally and at the corporate level. What advice do you have for leaders today who are having to deal with the multi-generations in the workplace, all of whom have different values, different perspectives of the future, different needs, different mindsets? There are 5 in the workforce and more in larger organizations. What advice for leaders do you have?
I would advise leaders to really take the time to understand the impact of digital technology on the makeup of the brain right now. That is probably the thing that is influencing every generation the most. And then you couple what's happening out in the external world to it too. And you've got a brain that is evolving and has become different from the one a 50-plus-year-old leader developed throughout the arc of their life and career. So you have generations that are like, hey, we're not into the corporate thing. Like, we're into doing it ourselves. And, we've got a different set of values. You've got Gen Alpha that's really been raised on this constant hit of feeling good. And you need to understand the implications of that and the different strategies people are going to employ when they're working in your organization. So I think psychology is really, 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 really important. I also think the processes that we use for aligning people around strategy need to be simplified. One good test to know if you actually have a strategy is to ask people throughout your organizations, what are the things that we're not going to do? And 90% of the time when we ask that question, nobody has any idea. And so that tells us that strategic processes are not translating across the organization, throughout the organization. And that leads to chaos and confusion. And when that happens, people are just working very hard to hit like immediate metrics, which are in their front view, but they're not tethered up to what the CEO and the board is needing. So there's understand brain changes. There is look at strategic processes. Um, create space where there isn't for um, reflection, dealing with toxicity,
Interesting. Yeah. Oh, wow.
replenishing, and evolution too. Mhm.
You are a wonderfully experienced, deeply thoughtful human being. You interact with leaders in all sorts of organizations. It sounds like at all sorts of levels. What makes a great leader in today's world? And who have your role models been for great leading and why?
I believe that what makes a great leader is emotional regulation,
Hmm.
self-awareness, accountability, and the ability to collaborate effectively with others.
Excellent.
In terms of who has influenced me, um, the people who have influenced me directly, meaning I've had a relationship with them, actually don't come from the business world at all. They come from other areas. So my drum teacher, my first career, as we touched on very, very briefly in my reference to Whitney Houston, was a gentleman by the name of Roy Burns. There's a wonderful story to tell there about Roy, but I'm not going to burn the time to share it with you.
Oh, please do.
Do we have the time?
I think so. I think so.
Okay. Roy grew up in Kansas City, and he grew up on a street where the military band would practice. They would march up and down his street, practice. And every day, Roy would sit on the curb and watch the band go back and forth. One day, the lead snare drummer in the military band walked over to Roy, handed him his drumsticks, leaned the snare drum down, and Roy proceeded to play all of the snare drum parts. He had never touched a drum or a drumstick prior to that moment.
Wow.
Lead snare drummer grabs Roy by the collar, drags him to the front of his house, knocks on the door, and says, "Ma'am, you need to get this kid drum lessons immediately." Fast forward 10 years later, Roy has $300 in his pocket, moves to New York. The first gig he lands is taking over the drum seat from Gene Krupa in Benny Goodman's band.
Oh, wow.
The rest is history.
Wow.
The rest is history.
Wow. Great story.
And along the way, Roy was tuned into his own development needs, and he became a master instructor. He was actually the first drummer to travel the world conducting clinics. And he also built a private studio, and he worked with a handful of drummers. And I just happened to get accepted to working with him. Roy, on the first lesson, Roy said, "I'm not going to teach you drums. I'm going to teach you about life." And then he pulled out a little drum pad on a tiny little metal stand, gave me one drumstick and said, "Hit this as hard as you can." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, hit it as hard as you can." And so being polite, I kind of give it a tap. And he was just like, "If you do that again, I'm not going to teach you. I'm going to throw you out." And so I hit it moderately hard, medium hard. And he said, "This is the last opportunity. Either you break this thing or you get out." And so I hit it as hard as I could, wham. And then he said, "Do it again." And I did it again, bam. But this time he caught my hand as the stick touched and connected with the pad. And he said, "Look at your fingers and the way that they're wrapped around the drumstick." And so I did. And he said, "That's how you hold a drumstick." And he said, "I didn't need to teach you that. Your body and your mind already know what to do."
Wow.
He said, "I just needed to help you get out of the way." And that was the context from which we proceeded to help me learn how to play the drums. 3 years later, 3 years after that first lesson, I was playing full-time professionally at the highest levels.
Wow.
So he influenced me. Other leaders, my teacher at the Zen Center was very much a renegade. He did not buy into kind of the go find a mountaintop that's quiet and meditate for 15 years. He located the Zen Center in Santa Monica, California, on one of the busiest streets in the city. And he was very much about applying a ton of pressure in helping us develop the ability to operate out in the world effectively. And I think in large part that was a big reason why I'm able to focus on conflict is the training there. But also, I seek leadership from the lineage and just being part of that. And the all that there is to study and to learn and to train is just incredibly profound and rich. The third person I'll mention is Dr. Paul Campbell, a doctor of Oriental medicine, who really helped me understand how the human system works and how to keep it healthy and functioning optimally. So as I've navigated ups and downs in terms of my health and well-being, that's been a foundation for me to fall back on and rely on too.
If I understand correctly, Mark, you've got great affinity for and work in mentoring other people.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, could you talk a little bit about mentorship, what it is, how it might differ from leading others, if at all, and how you see it being used today? Because the term is thrown out a lot.
It is. It is. I think I've probably mentored over 1,700 entrepreneurs at this point.
Wow. And
Spent
what
a
is
lot
that?
of time with people.
Boy, no kidding. So I asked the right question at the right time to the right person. So what does that look like? What does mentoring 1,700 people look like?
I believe that when it comes to people's development and how they ultimately perform, there is awareness, there's knowledge, and then there's mastery. And the key to mentoring is to be able to identify where a person is. Do they have the awareness to do what it is that they're seeking to do or they're being called to do? Do they have the knowledge? And then do they have the mastery to do it in a seemingly effortless way? So with that as the lens through which we're exploring this notion of mentorship, that brings me to, where do people learn? People do not learn reading the operating manual or the employee handbook. People learn through interaction and being in relationship. It's why it's such a travesty that wood shop and band class and all the things that we used to have available to us in American culture and society and school system, it's such a tragedy that they're not available for young people, because we learn through doing. We learn through the conversations that we're having, on the side, in the spur of the moment as you're troubleshooting. And so mentoring for me is about that. It is using stories, using real-time situations to help people connect the dots and to move them through awareness, knowledge, and mastery. And then most of mentoring for me is about helping people do what Roy did for me, which is to learn the power and the safety and the confidence that comes from fully immersing yourself to the point where the mind lets go and you're able to actually access your capability, your innate capability that's right there. And so I would say 80% of mentoring for me, in the context of awareness and knowledge and wisdom, is helping people move out of the way. And that's where my Zen training comes in, and my understanding of neuroscience, albeit little, is very helpful. I can help people move through the mental barriers and blocks that they're projecting onto whatever it is that they're trying to engage in and pursue.
If I work for you, part of what you provide me, one reason that I would follow you is that you help me be better by helping me understand the things that are holding me back, whether real or imagined or emotional or whatever they are, and helping me develop the tools and capabilities to resolve those things.
When we hear the word lead, I think there's an assumption, there's a presumption that means in front.
Oh, yeah.
And I've never perceived myself as somebody who leads from the front. I tend to position myself behind and look over people's shoulder and to help them see the terrain or the horizon in the way that I'm seeing it. And then we talk about it, and then we align, and then we go through whatever we need to do to help them, again, work optimally at the highest level.
I know that was a political meme a number of years ago when I think it was Obama who said something about kind of more of a partnering paradigm, and people said, "Oh, you got to lead from the front," and kind of derided him for that notion. I've defined leading for me as building capacity of self and others to create breakthrough results.
Yeah.
And it doesn't say front, back, sideways, but I also hold a kind of a power with versus a power over, or a partnership paradigm versus a power over paradigm.
Yep.
Could you riff on that for a second? Like this notion about not leading from the front, but leading from behind and peering over shoulders?
I like your definition, and I like how you described it, and even how you used your hands to convey it. Yeah, because
It's early here. It's early.
yeah,
I'm still.
some of my friends would say, "Oh, pizza toss." Um, uh, Well, I mean, if you are quote unquote the leader, I do think that there is a certain responsibility around vision and direction. You
Right.
do need to provide that. You need to provide context, and then from there, then you move around. And so you don't want to end up being fixed in one position or in one point of view.
Yeah.
But you do need to be responsible for vision and help people connect with it. And then from there, I don't see how anyone could not understand or grasp the togetherness component of what you described in your definition.
Mm.
Any sense of I'm separate because I'm quote
Mm.
unquote a leader, that is delusion.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
there's no way we cannot be in relationship.
Yeah.
And the thing that makes us uniquely gifted is that we can determine and declare the kind of relationship that we're going to be in. And even when relationships no longer work and people decide to go in different ways, you're still in relationship. It's just the form of the relationship has changed. So if leadership is about being in it together,
Mm.
uh, then and we have this very unique form of agency that allows us to determine the form of these relationships. Well, then that is on really the leader to bring forth and to nurture and to cultivate.
What's keeping your bucket filled these days? What's influencing you? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What are you absorbing these days?
I actually have my Kindle open because I knew you were going to ask me this question, and I didn't want to sit here and stumble. um, I'm reading for a third time, Change and How to Make Big Things Happen by Damon Centola.
Hmm.
I think every leader should take the time to read that. I'm also reading The Coming Wave. That's about AI power and our future by Mustafa Suleiman.
Hmm.
I'm going back and I'm reading about persuasive technology
Hmm.
by B.J. Fogg. So B.J. Fogg is the academic and scholar and professor at Stanford University who trained all of a significant number of our tech entrepreneurs in persuasive techniques that got baked into Facebook, et
Oh
cetera,
wow.
et cetera, et
Wow.
cetera. Yeah. And so that's what led to Tristan Harris saying, wait a minute here, and I forget the name of the documentary film that Tristan starred in. Was it The Social Dilemma?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that whole generation came from Dr. Fogg. So I'm reading that again. I'm also reading World Systems Analysis, which is basically a review and a summary of Emmanuel Wallerstein's work in world systems. And I'm also reading Context Changes Everything. And it's
Hmm.
a book about how constraints create coherence
Hmm.
and emergence in groups. And that's by a brilliant PhD, Alicia Horaro.
Hmm.
And that's one of those books where I don't even know what she's talking about. My wife says, "Why are you reading it?"
Uh,
I'm like, because I feel like the longer I spend time with it, I'm going to start connecting the dots. And maybe it's good for my brain health at this stage of my life, too.
every once in a while, a synapse will fire, and you go, "I got that. I got that piece."
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that's great. What's the world conflict that you think is resolvable that you have not yet been involved in that you'd really like to have a crack at?
The conflict of all conflicts, if I have to be honest, I really hope people don't get turned off by this because I do really want to work with leaders and help them do what they want to do and use our capabilities. Is I really think the big conflict that leads to all other conflicts is the current configuration of our economic system.
Mm.
Yeah. And the underlying value equations that drive it, and the subterranean kind of human and ethical values that we bring to those equations. And it would be wonderful to participate at an even greater level to shift that.
Wow. Well, you think big.
Yeah, why not? Think big,
I
and if
love
you even
that.
get to 50%, why not?
I love that. What should we be aware of? What can we promote for you? What do you want us paying attention to? Is there a Mark Eckhardt book or article or podcast or something that we could pay attention to and learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
There is a newsletter for 1 Million Proofs called Decoded. We can share the link and people
Excellent.
can sign up for that, which would be wonderful. You can just put the word out that we're here to help brands navigate the 250th anniversary. We're also here to help leaders navigate what's unfolding due to changing world order at large. But we're here to just have a conversation and to learn about what really matters to folks, what they're interested in, what they're trying to do. So I'm always doing whatever I can to learn as much as possible by just being in relationship with folks and having that mutual exchange.
Well, Mark, so great. Thank you so much for your time, your passion, your energies, and the focus that you are for people in the world. Fantastic. I appreciate the thinking. This really has an important influence on my thoughts about leaders' challenges, but also leaders' kind of responses in today's world. And for that, I'm deeply grateful.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel good to hear. And this has been an honor, true privilege. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mark. We will talk soon.
Great. Be well.
I promised a juicy conversation with Mark Eckhardt, and I hope that delivered. I learned so much from Mark about the steps that are being taken and that one can take to better effectively understand the true sources of conflict and resolve it. Hey, set the table, invite cool people, magic happens. Until next time, stepwise, leaders.
Thank you for listening to Stepwise. Stepwise is brought to you by Dr. Foster Mobley. Edited and promoted by Zetis. You can listen to more episodes wherever you stream podcasts. Find out more at fostermobleymt.com or follow us on social media at Foster Mobley. That's FOSTERMOBLEY. We look forward to having an inspiring conversation with you soon.